All right, class. So today we have Benjamin Lancaster joining us again to talk about a project he's been working on recently. He originally joined us back in 2019 to talk about a film that he produced, wrote, directed called Further Adventures of Walt's Frozen Head. And I love telling the story about kind of what's behind that story, but I'll let Benjamin do that in a little bit. So we'll start out talking about that, and then we're going to transition to a another project he's working on right now, which is a really fun, really witty project called Prototype World of Tomorrow, and producing an audio drama. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Benjamin. And Benjamin, if you could give the students a little bit of background as to who you are, and how you became interested in creating content around the Disney brand.
Um, so
So
it,
thank you for joining us.
oh, well, thank you for having me. It's easiest to start with Walt's Frozen Head. I was in film school at the time, getting my MFA at UCF, and I'm not sure if I told the story to your class the last time, but it's for me, it's been a year. So even if it's momentarily for you, it's been a longer time for me. But the idea for Walt's Frozen Head really came from the title. Me and a bunch of film students were just throwing around like, what's the craziest movie you could film in a way that felt very Central Florida, because the program at that point was very much about micro budget, using the resources you have. What do you have at your disposal? So what's unique about Florida? What's something you can show Florida? So the title just came out and floated there in the air, and I come home and tell my wife about it, and that is, in her mind, that's it. That's the film I'm going to be making. That's the film I'm going to be creating. As part of the MFA program there, you make an entire feature. And I saw the idea for a commercial success with this, because when you're making content on that small level, you need that little bit of hook. You need that little bit of, uniqueness, something that's going to get your name out there. And so, we moved forward with it. I started developing the script based on the Neil Gabler biography specifically, as well as some other additional research. But that was really key to, I think, diving in the armchair psychology approach that you need when you're writing a fictionalized version of a real character. So, there was a ton of research that went into the script on that level. And then it was, producing. I should mention to your students that haven't seen it that it is a film that is shot partially in the Walt Disney World parks without permission. So that's again one of the key hooks that we knew was going to attract attention. People were going to be interested in it for that reason. So that was where we started, and that's kind of the small view of that. We went on to premiere at several different film festivals across the country. We had a screening in Orlando, which went quite well, which really was the one at which most of our fan base who were based in the city could show up. And then it's kind of continued to live on YouTube. We originally had it slated for Amazon Prime, and on a pay-per-view basis. And it, after a lot of discussion, we looked around at all the people who were involved in the film, and we decided that exposure was more important for us than whatever small amount of money we might make off of it by selling it for $10 or whatever. So we transitioned very quickly to not throwing it up. We shot it up on YouTube, and that's where it lives to this day. We were actually planning on taking it down in early 2020 and making it for sale somewhere, but then the pandemic happened, and it felt like this is at least something we can keep up and give people a little bit of extra entertainment during those early days of the pandemic. So that's where it is now. So
Well, and the the movie is so fun, and I'm going to get you to tell kind of the backstory behind it for
sure.
people who don't know why Walt's head would be frozen. But a side note, I had been keeping up with the movie and when it was going to be released, and I had seen that, and the the weekend that you premiered it in Orlando, I was actually in Orlando
Mhm.
for a conference. I think that Thursday and Friday. And Thursday, I met Ron Schneider, who plays
Mhm.
Walt, um, and he was the original Dream Finder. And I met him for lunch at Disney Springs. And when we were eating, he said, "Oh, when are you leaving it?" And I said, "I'm leaving early Saturday morning." He says, "Oh, that's too bad, because Saturday night is when we're going to premiere the film." And so I anxiously awaited.
Mhm.
Well, I guess after that, it was you and I were going to do our class visit, and I think the week before we did the class visit is when it dropped on YouTube.
That
Uh,
sounds, yeah, that sounds right.
and so it's just it's fun. It's fun to see how it's made to in the
Mhm.
parks. But for the people who don't know, could you give a little bit of backstory on why, like, essentially why Walt would have a frozen head, and why he would be doing the things he's doing?
So the first cryogenic preservation um, occurred very shortly after Walt's death. I think about a month, and within a few months of Walt's death, for some reason, this became an urban legend very quickly that Walt Disney had had himself frozen, and with the idea that he was going to be preserved, and then at some point they were going to cure lung cancer, and they were going to bring him back. Um, very little to no evidence for this whatsoever. But it is, comical to think about. I don't know when we transitioned from Walt had himself preserved to Walt's head specifically, but I do know that they are doing just heads for certain people, and it is more cost effective if that's something you're interested in. Um, so that is a little extra twist that got folded into the kind of urban legend joke, urban legend almost more than anything over the years. um and But I think more than anything, the fact that it persists about this specific person
Mhm.
tells you how Walt is viewed by people, because it's a very extreme act to
Mhm.
functionally end your life slightly early on the hopes that someday you'll have this level of being able to be thought out, being able to see the future. Whatever it is that your goal is, there's something about the character broadly understood about Walt Disney that makes us think that that's even within the realm of plausibility of something he would want. And to me, that's much more interesting than the TikTok of know who he was actually, where his ashes are buried, this, that, and the other. So you can disprove that all you want, but to me, it's interesting the public perception of, yes, this
Mhm.
is something this guy would do, and that becomes the rumor and the myth moving forward. Because he was much more than Iger, much more than Eisner, much more than any other Disney CEO, um, probably much more than any other corporate business leader. He was a character of
Mhm.
his own creation, of this carefully curated media image, that was not only what the brand represented, but also then what he represented as part of that brand. And like it or not, now part of that brand is associated with, he had himself preserved so he could continue on in some form. Um, I'm not sure that people who work for Ford sit around thinking, what would Henry do? I'm not sure people who sit around at any other company you can name, think about, what would our founder do. There is still that sense in some parts of the Disney company that is a thing we consider. um, Less today, as we're that as we heard the news of today, but
Yeah.
with the number of layoffs occurring at
Yeah.
the parks. But that is something that's still in the company, and I think this whole myth of him being frozen really does relate to that.
Well, and it's this being a class about what it means to be a fan.
Mhm.
I mean, we're talking because you made first a fan film,
Mhm.
and then now you're doing audio dramas, um, around these ideas, but also the the notion that somebody or people kept this urban legend going
Mhm.
is also a testament to the fans and to what people thought of him.
Mhm.
Like you said, I mean, people aren't sitting around thinking what their CEOs are doing,
Mhm.
or what they would do if they came back. And the like the premise, and I don't want to give too much away, but the premise of the movie being that he comes back and
Oh, I mean, we start the movie on that, like
yeah,
instantly. The
it,
the premise of the film, it expands on the myth and saying he's de-thawed once a year to give advice on how to run the company for the next year. So, that's not that's how the movie starts. That's the basis of the idea. Um,
and what's so great is that I can't remember the specific movie, but they thaw him out and he's supposed to watch a movie.
mhm.
I think it was one of the whatever Pixar was
It was
releasing
Good
at that time.
Dinosaur, yeah,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
had
So
not even been close to coming out,
yeah,
like when
yeah.
we released the films, or when we
Um,
shot the film, I should say.
and so he's supposed to like do these things, and he's supposed to make these decisions like a board in a boardroom, sort of, like a
Mhm,
boardroom discussion. And all he wants to do is go to the park. He wants to see Magic Kingdom,
mhm,
which is so is funny on the surface level, but honestly is just it's beautiful on a
mhm,
deeper level, that it's like, because the the public persona that was built around him later in his life, especially after Disneyland opened,
mhm,
was his love. The stories of him going to Griffith Park and with his daughters and wanting a place where families could interact together. And so it really is, and I'm sure, you know, you all had discussions when you were doing this, but it really is. It's a great story about here's a person who the company wants him to do certain things because, in this like fantasy world, they can't make decisions without him, or they want him to sign off on things.
mhm.
And all he wants to do is go to the parks. He wants to see what his creation was. There's a line in the trailer, and then obviously the movie, where he says, I don't even know the color of that hat shop. And
Mhm.
then as soon as he walks in, or as soon as he gets taken in, he says it's blue. And it is. I've watched the movie multiple times because it just makes you feel good, based on what he's doing. There's the theme of the main character who takes him into the parks and his relationship with his family and his daughter. It's a really, really good movie, and if I can say, every time that I watch it, I appreciate it more and more.
Thank you.
So
I
yeah.
really, that means a lot. That really does.
um so one one thing that I found so enthralling, and actually the thing that um kind of got my attention to the movie in the first place, we'll talk about briefly before we transition, is the inclusion of Ron Schneider
Mhm.
as Walt Disney. And I know from the last time you visited with us, you said how his scenes were shot, and I believe he was shot post
Yes,
everyone else,
almost a
right?
year after the rest of the scenes were shot.
Okay. And having communicated with him and kind of knowing some of the backstory and everything, it was just really, really fun. And the students and the people listening to this probably have listened to our class visit with Ron Schneider.
Mhm.
So they know what he did with the company as far as working at the Golden Horseshoe Review, and working as the original Dream Finder at Epcot Center. But if you could just give a brief kind of description of what it
Mhm.
was to work with him, and how you chose him to play really a beloved character, or
Mhm.
at least the head of a beloved character, right?
um, so I met Ron at a book signing the first time when another documentary film about Disney parks was getting released. And our trailer was on the front of this, and at that point we hadn't cast Walt. So I believe it's actually my voice as Walt has one line in there, and
Yeah.
it's my voice in the trailer. This was very early in that process. So I meet Ron at the book signing, and for me, Journey into Imagination, I wrote it when I was 5. I can describe scenes from it. It is so imprinted on my memory, in a way that I think, I don't want to say modern rides aren't. I don't know what 5-year-olds are imprinted with today. It makes me weep that I can't give my kids that experience, of all the experiences. I wish I could take them back and show them. Journey into Imagination is just mind-blowingly important for people of that age. So that's a tangent, but regardless, it's like meeting your heroes. Meeting Ron, the person who created this walk around version of these characters, is just this incredible experience. But I meet him, fantastic. We kind of go on with her life, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, if maybe we should reach out. Like I've not seen him act. I know he can act. He's been in Golden Horseshoe, but I've not seen him perform. But it's just this kind of little seed that's implanted, and it's months later, and we are talking to agents in Hollywood to talk to, people who are older character actors and things like that. Okay, what would rates be? This, that, and the other. Can we fly out a crew? Would they be willing to fly here? We're having these discussions, and no one's quite clicking for the role. And so we're talking with the other producers. The question is like, hey, let's reach out to Ron. We can easily look up his information. I got his email from his blog. Reach out to Ron, see if he would be willing to submit an audition. So our producer sent him the email with the script attached. Instantly, we get this. Within a few days, we get the audition back. And just instantly, even with the beard, even without the makeup, he snaps into that character without a second thought. In a way that it's uncanny how quickly he could just turn it on and turn it off, even before the makeup, even before all of the effects and everything. It was like seeing the character of Walt come to life. And I think that's what we got when we had that level of knowledge about and I'm not even saying like esoteric knowledge about the parks, but understanding of who this person was, or at least their public perception, from someone who had worked for that company that still reveres that public perception to this day. So that was an incredible experience. And then we shot the thing over 2 or 3 days on a soundstage, with our special effects and all team. And for him, he was sitting in an office chair, and we were just wheeling the camera around to get the different angles. And it was us reading lines against him, and he turns in this fantastic performance. I mean, we shot this entire movie without the two leads ever meeting each other. I think Daniel stopped by one day to shake the guy's hand, that shakes Ron's hand, but that was their entire interaction until the premiere. So it was a really cool experience, and we couldn't have asked for a better Walt.
Yeah, and he does a fantastic job, and I love the lines that are thrown in that are credited to Walt Disney, at least. And there's a part in the movie where the main character and Walt have they have this dialogue, and they have a conversation, and Walt says something to the effect of, you can't hold on to your kids forever. They grow up, and it's, to any parent, when you watch that, you think that's very touching, and it connects on a different level. And also, quickly on your statement about Ron in general, and the Imagination Pavilion and Journey into Imagination. I mean, you can tell by what I'm sitting in front of, or the virtual background, I should say, that that was, I went, I think in 87 was the first time I went, 86 or 87, and I have pictures of me by a giant, probably 7 foot tall Figment sitting on my desk right now. I have like Figment and around the room a few different um, figures or plushes or things like that. And it the so it is. I agree with you as far as um, the ride, the meaning behind the ride, and the fact that he helped create these characters, and he was the first one to do it. He literally wrote the book on being able to do it. Is so fantastic. And a quick story at 2000 this last September, 2019, we went with my two young boys, and one was turned 5 in the Magic Kingdom actually, and the other was 3, and or about to be 3. And so we go on Journey into Imagination with Figment, and we go into the DreamWorks, and we're waiting in line for them to meet. I believe it was Ralph and Vanellope von Schweetz,
Mm-hmm.
and the place it is a fragment or a fraction of what it used to be. But I turn around and I see the boys playing on different things, and I mean, you talk about just kind of that awesome dad moment,
Yeah.
And I shot uh, Lou. I mean, I shot Ron a quick text saying, this is awesome. That like I'm getting to stand here watching this, and thank him again for helping to create that.
Yeah.
Um, so it's an awesome movie, and it's available on YouTube. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I know the students in class have it linked, and in the show notes for the first visit you did with us, it's linked in those show notes, and I'll also link it in these show notes so people can watch it. It's a lot of fun, and I just looked at some of the stats of it. It definitely, people are engaging with it. And there's
Mm-hmm.
kind of an interesting story before we transition. Of last time you met with us, you told us kind of the fandom around it, and where you actually ended up looking into or having to look into doing a limited edition like Blu-ray release,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Yeah, we were. Um, it was shocking to me that this movie that's available for free on YouTube, um, like people also wanted to purchase
Mhm.
it. So we came out with a limited edition DVD, and we sold a bunch of copies. Like I was legitimately surprised that people were willing to give us hard-earned American currency for something that they also can get for free. But there are people who occasionally I'll get a YouTube comment or something along those lines, and I got one just the other day that said, "This is the third time I've watched this movie," and like it's a YouTube video at this point.
Yeah.
Like, really, you came back 3 times? And it's not like the movie has a million views or something like that, but we've got people who keep coming back to it
Yeah.
and want to give us money for it, which is wonderful and interesting, and not something I'd necessarily anticipated. Like our goal was to kind of use the story to sort of get into a big film festival, and then whatever, maybe we'll get a distribution deal. It obviously took a different turn, and but it's incredibly heartwarming when you get some feedback like that, like, yes, this person, it's this person's favorite movie or
Yeah.
whatever. Like, we made the thing for a few $1,000 at the end of the day, like, not a few anyway. Regardless, um and
Yeah.
it's still plenty in the red, don't worry. But
It's just like I said. I mean, the in my opinion, the viewership's nothing to bat an eye at. It's
mhm.
it's growing, and you have obviously you have people who've seen it
And
multiple times, and
what is weird is occasionally somebody will send me something that's like, "Hey, did you realize that a clip from your movie is in?" And it's somebody with like millions of YouTube videos, and they just needed a Walt's frozen head
yeah,
clip, and they pulled it from our movie. And so like we're almost a pop culture icon without.
yeah,
I keep waiting for like the gifts to show up,
yeah,
which hey, may still happen. But like we got mentioned on John Hodgson's podcast the other day, and like, you know, uh, but it, it's still just sitting there. it's still sitting there on YouTube. So
Well, and you still have, you do this fun, uh your Twitter
yeah.
handle is so fun, and just kind of just keep engaging with people, and so what you're what you're doing, and what you all did, what you continue to do with it, definitely is working.
Mhm.
So I commend you for that. Also, I thank you for it, because, as I said, I've watched it a few times. Then it's one of those that, um, you appreciate it more and more
Mhm.
when you watch it, because it's just a fun thing to watch on a fun
Mhm.
topic. Um, so then let's transition to what you're doing now, and based on your virtual background, um,
Mhm.
the Progress City, and the model people see on the TTA when they're riding in Magic Kingdom. Um, tell us about how you came up with the idea, and then what prototype World of Tomorrow is.
Mhm. So, um, I was always I knew after Walt's Frozen Head that this was a non-replicable event. Like I had access and connections and talent and all of these things that I wasn't going to be able to do again. So I knew if I was going to make another project, it was going to have to be something just dramatically different than what I had. And I also looked around and I realized I had built this, 10,000 or so fan base on the Twitter following. So I think, well, if I can create something that A, I'm really passionate about, and that B, feeds into this already existing fan base, I'm a leg up. I'm starting on the thing on first base, functionally. So um, I came out with this idea of doing a murder mystery that's set in the original plans for Epcot, which were basically a city that was going to be built around the same spot Epcot is today. But it was going to be a city of 20,000 residents. It was going to have this large industrial park component. They were going to try and convince the major American corporations to set up a headquarters
Mm-hmm.
here, research labs, R&D, some deal making back and forth, obviously, because when you get that many people together, and it was going to be a showcase of American ingenuity. This is how we're going to win the Cold War sort of mentality. And you were just going to have this permanent showcase of what Americans could do together. And it was a Silicon Valley. It was a that sort of thing, but in this permanent form, in this
Mm-hmm.
structured form. So they had the urban. It was not just going to be American industry. It was also going to be urban planning. It was also going to have so many more components. But as you look into the details of how this was going to work, some of the things are like a little interesting, a little off, like the fact that you couldn't buy property. You
Mm-hmm.
could rent, you could stay there for a limited period of time, and then you were kicked out of the city, because they couldn't figure out a way to not grant you voting rights if you and they
Yeah.
can't have voting rights because
Yeah.
then you might vote not the way they want to run things.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, this is actually the legal structure of Disney World to this day.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
they they passed a lot of those reforms. I think Bay Lake has like 20 citizens or something like that. They've got a mayor, and then 80,000 people come to the Magic
Mm-hmm.
Kingdom. So it's and theoretically governed by these 20 people. Yeah, actually governed by the company, but that's neither here nor
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Um, so to me, the dynamics of how this was going to work, in that it's this wonderful place to live. Your children have the world's best education. You get the absolute newest technology literally delivered to into your house, with your old one being replaced out at the same time. Um, but on the other hand, there's so many trade-offs when it comes to privacy. There's so many
Mm-hmm.
trade-offs when it comes to like some form of civil rights, that it's to me this incredibly interesting idea to explore. Um, and then when you're looking at radio, a murder mystery is this kind of classic drama, but it's also one, um, and I can't remember who wrote about this, but one of the, I'm going to butcher this quote too, but one of the classic murder mystery authors, like Raymond Chandler, somebody like it might have been him. um, you wrote that the interesting thing about murder mystery novels is the detective is someone who transcends class. And so he's talking to the busboy, he's talking to the restaurant owner, he's talking to the millionaire who's eating at the restaurant. Um, and so it is in some ways this perfect genre for looking at a place, because you have someone who can navigate through the hierarchies, the working class, who kind of
Hmm.
transcends all of that. You get these interesting views into the politics, you get these interesting views into the industries, you get the also you can have your hero go anywhere. And so I think that was it was a natural fit to put those two together. And it also gives you some Blade Runner vibes.
Yeah,
A very
yeah.
different location than Blade Runner, but it is kind of that fundamentally that you know um, guy thrown into a situation, into a murder mystery that happens in a futuristic city.
Yeah. And the thing that hooked me and got me listening, um, was the two main characters. One being kind of, um, I don't know a better way to explain it, aloof, I guess. That
Mhm.
um, he runs this small, um, private investigation company out of his home, out of his apartment. He doesn't, and a lot of the second season is kind of his the partner that he acquires at the end of the first season is, their kind of debate back and forth and give and take about finding a place, to have an actual office set up. And one of just the to me, the one of the really funny scenes is in early in the second season when his partner comes to his apartment and he doesn't want to get out of bed before, I think, 10
Mhm.
o'clock or whatever. And she's the polar opposite, as far as, so it's this relationship of like this odd couple as well. And so can you talk a little bit about those two, and if there is, like, how you developed those characters, if they're based on somebody, or they just kind of, because they're both really witty in their own way.
So, the first draft of the script had this just very kind of generic hard-boiled detective. Um, and it was okay. It was fine, but it was a little bit rote, because we were going with this sort of stock Philip Marlowe sort of Sam Spade character. Anyway, um, then I finally settled on who I thought the character was, and I'll kind of just shamelessly ripped off who I think is one of the most developed characters from fiction. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the P.G. Wodehouse novels. It's a series of
Mm,
comic novels written like from the 1920s to the 1950s,
okay.
and the it, you probably know the name Jeeves, the
Hmm.
butler. Jeeves the butler is Bertie Wooster's butler, and he
Okay.
is a bachelor who navigates the world of the social upper class. Doesn't really have a care in the world. Kind of gets by on his wits and the fact that his family is loaded. Doesn't have to work. This so and it was so it's very much influenced by that mentality. So I kept going back to those. There's a series, a television series. There's the novels. There's the audio versions of them. Like everything you could want. This character's been shown in different media, and um, I really kind of tried to swallow that as far as what makes this character who their perspective is on life, and then like take them out of that British aristocracy and drop them
Yeah.
off in this city. And so that really was a kind of a key to unlocking, or at least the jumping off point to who Tim was. For me, so hey, good artists. What is it? Good artists imitate, great artists
Yeah.
steal. I'm not saying I'm great, but Tim is pretty much a knockoff of this, uh, early 20th
Yeah.
century literary character. Um, and then finding Eve was finding someone who complemented that and would always fight against him no
Yeah.
matter what the situation was, and was just this sort of polar opposite person. Originally it was going to be Eve has some social skills and Tim is a little more mechanically thinking, and someone told me no, like that you're just playing into stereotypes at this point. Like, make your main character who's narrating this the socially whatever one. And that was fantastic advice, and we implemented it, and we got the dynamic that we have today. So
and it's a great dynamic, which makes for um, a great agency name. What is the agency's name in the second season?
Less and More Security.
Yes, it's just I don't know, for people who, the students who haven't listened and people who haven't listened, you it's just a great way to listen to something and kind of unwind, and then you're at least for me, I'm listening to it and I'm going about my day, I'm going on a walk or something, and then something happens and I'm like, oh, I've got to rewind that. What was that? And it's these great one-liners, and it's a great story, and so the premise of the series is each season tells a different story about, and sort of introduces new citizens of this
Right.
city, right?
So I see it as, it's like a series of detective novels where each book is a different season functionally. So it's not quite the same as a TV show, which might have this arc that extends across seasons. So they are sort of self-contained in that they solve this mystery, but then the world gets a little bigger each time. We introduce some new characters, we introduce some new settings, and there is this overall storyline that's going to permeate through all the seasons. So far we've only had the two. But just like chapters in a book, there's divisions there, and just like books in a series, there's the division there, and then we're getting to an overarching story that's kind of the epic story of the city, and we'll get to some more surprises as we get through additional seasons.
Yeah, and so it's 2 seasons now. How, you don't have to say if you don't want, you can't, but how many plans, how many plans do you have for how many seasons?
We're doing an extended Christmas episode this year, I can tell you.
Okay.
And then I'd like to get 3 seasons done next year. We'll see if that's too ambitious,
Okay.
but I've got 3 seasons plotted out for next year, each of which are multi-part. I don't know if they're all going to be 4 or 5 episodes. Some might be shorter, some might be a little longer. But that's what we're looking at this point. So we've got a supersized Christmas episode coming out that's going to be 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
Then we've got we're probably going to go back to the 30-minute multiple episodes seasons that have 4 or 5 parts.
And
that's foreseeable. That's not going to finish the story yet.
Yeah.
There's still more to come after that.
Well, and what's so fun is like the stories don't, the overall story arc never, it doesn't have to end, right? You keep creating and people keep listening, and does anyone do you have anyone who contacts you with ideas that, like, hey, I think this would be great to hear from this person or this person's perspective?
We've gotten a few suggestions. I'm trying to because a lot of it's in my head right now, I'm trying to I'm not trying to be whatever about it, but like, I've got this plan. Trust me. It's not lost. I promise. It's going to come to an end. It's going to be more satisfying than what you're, so there is some of that, but like, yeah, sure. I've gotten a few suggestions. A few cast members have actually brought up stuff, which they're the ones who are super invested, super interested, and I'm always happy to hear from them. One cast member told me that they wanted like a full spin-off of other things going on in progress besides Tim and Eve, and I'm like, whoa, time out. I can't keep up with Tim and Eve and getting content for them, and I've like, their story is so like, let's hold the phone on like the spin-off series before we get away from the main. But it's interesting though, because like, we've come out with as much content as The Mandalorian comes out, and this is like not not a job for me. You know, this is a
Yeah.
part-time evenings and weekends sort of thing. You know, so at some point we're gonna figure out how to get content churning because people are obviously interested in it.
Yeah.
You know, and when we go through productions weeks, it's difficult to churn at the rate we're getting stuff out and making sure it's the quality that I'm hoping we're achieving. So
And I should say, one of the actors, one of the talent, John Sakari. He spoke to the class, and him and I communicate. We've communicated back and forth a few times, and he actually kind of, he, I said, hey, I'm just starting season two, and he's like, oh, season two is so fun. He's like, it was really really fun for me, and so it's kind of neat seeing all that, which
yeah,
brings up the next question.
he's always pressuring me like, hey, Rick could be in this scene, right?
Yeah.
Rick could be in this scene, right? Sure, John. You're
So
all right, Rick. In
it brings up the next question as to how you found the talent. Are they people that you've known? Do you are you at the point where people, you put out calls for it and people audition, or how do
yeah,
you do that?
um, so it was a mix this time. A few people were people I had worked on other projects with before, um, and sort of reached out to them individually. Um, and then we put out some open calls on some acting forums, and I think both Tim and Eve were part of that. And then I also just made sure I was promoting it on the Walt's Frozen Head Twitter and on a few other places that I knew Disney fans were hanging out, and we got some people who were, you know, came in through that channel and through who I kind of either knew or didn't quite know yet, through that. So, people like Hal Bowers, who does the Retro Walt Disney World
Mhm.
podcast. He's multiple characters in the series. Barry Wallace is a podcaster as well who does a lot of different characters. So it really came in through a mix.
And I think because the season two was released, um, once or I should say, once stay-at-home orders had
Mhm.
been announced and everything, and once people were quarantining, and so the whole time I was listening to it, I was thinking, how do you produce something like this that is, yes, different from trying to
Mhm.
produce like when you did with Further Adventures, but how do you produce and put together an audio drama like this?
It's the perfect quarantine media for production, because everyone is recording it in their own homes with their own home
Okay.
setups. So we're treating it somewhat like a theater
Okay.
where each scene is done with all the people there. They're playing off each other. We do 2, 3 takes, 4 takes sometimes. Stop, give notes, go back, that sort of thing until I'm very happy with it, um, and then it's me going through, taking each clip, putting it together.
Yeah.
Just like in some ways, just like editing a movie, but there's a lot more freedom because it doesn't have to visually connect. There's a ton more freedom to be able to take even like this half of this phrase, smash it with that half of that phrase, come out with a fantastic take. That's the combination of those two.
And do you think there are so many things that have happened during the pandemic, or that have happened during quarantine, that
Yeah.
um, I think are going to stay around after? And one of them is, you see uh, the cast of a lot of these kind of revered movies from our past
Hmm.
that are now doing like read-throughs and live
Yeah.
read. Princess Bride did it, and
Yeah.
you've had all of these casts that do this. Do you think this way of, or do you think this is something that's going to stick around? That people are going to be doing these huge Zoom calls where they're acting out, and do you think in a way that's going to change even local theaters, that you know
Huh.
now you can watch it,
Hmm.
and yeah, you're watching a person acting in their, or voice acting or acting in their house, but it's an environment where you're in your home, you're not having to go somewhere else?
I don't know. I really don't know what to say. Maybe we'll see. Um, ultimately, we were from the beginning planning on the way we're going to turn this into something bigger. Like the next step is for us to do live shows.
Okay.
Obviously, that came off the table in April. We'll see what we're like in next April. Maybe we can look at Christmas 2021 doing a live show then. Because that was always the plan, because I do think there's a level of energy that happens when you're live that doesn't necessarily happen when you're doing this highly polished, highly edited thing. So for right now, this is what it is. I can't tell you. I don't know if it's that we don't have new content right now, and so that's why it's becoming big. Maybe it will stick around. I really couldn't say one way or another at this point.
Well, that's exciting.
We wouldn't have released an audio podcast the year everybody lost their commute. That would not have been our choice.
However, I imagine a lot of people are more people are out walking and working in their yards and things like that. So you have time that you're able to. I used to listen to music when I would work out in the yard, and I would go on walks. And now I listen to podcasts more and more because I did lose that drive in. I lost my commute. So this is what I do. If you ever do have the live show, you got to let me know. I will, if there's any way I can, I will find a way to attend, because it's just fun. The last question before we do our rapid fire is, how, dealing with your fandom, how did you become, are you have you been a lifelong fan of Disney, or is this something that you've kind of come across that, hey, here's these interesting storylines, and I didn't get to say it, your description of why you wanted to do the podcast is very interesting. Like looking at, all the things that go on behind this utopian society. So tell us a little bit about your background, about your fandom, or where it is.
So I visited the park when I was 5, and once again when I was 7. Then didn't get back until I was an adult. I also, from the time I was 7 until, as far as I can remember, would go to the library and check out the guides to Disney, to read through them, to see what was new, to read about the park. I mean, it wasn't pre-internet, but it was early internet days. And it was, for me, everything I could learn about that. I don't know what it was, but if I was just the right age or whatever, but it clicked. And become like the parks especially. That's what drove me into the Disney fandom. It was absolutely the parks. Like, who knows if I would have gone to SeaWorld, if I would have become a marine biologist afterward. But to me, that was there was something that was somewhat fulfilled by the experience of going to a Disney park that I think is difficult for people who don't get an emotional trigger out of that to quite understand. It helps that the parks were objectively better then. In a lot of ways. I'm not going to say in every way. There's beautiful things that they're still doing now, but there is something in those parks that existed in the 80s and 90s that were absolutely magical to a kid who was walking in at that impressionable age.
And I know some of it is, it's human nature that we look back at when we were kids, and now seeing, so I have memories of the few times that I was able to go as a kid, and now seeing my kids going, and seeing it, everybody says see it through their eyes, but it really is, it's incredible, and it just brings back a lot of these feelings that your memories of when the first time you saw these. Like one example, I remember when they closed Maelstrom, and they reimagined it, to Frozen Ever After, and I thought, hey, this is going to be great. I really, um, Maelstrom was one of my favorite rides.
Yeah.
Um, and the first time I rode Frozen Ever After, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is, yeah, I understand why they did this. Not just because it's after one of their most successful franchises, but man, they did a really, really good
Yeah,
job with
they
this.
did.
And it's a
They did.
really good story. And you know, it's awesome that it's a different story
Mhm.
that kind of comes from the first movie.
Yeah.
So, and kind of wrapping up, like I said, I like to have some sort of rapid fire questions.
Sure.
So if you don't mind, these can be it's off the top of your head. You can
All right.
explain as much as you want. You don't have to explain anything
Okay.
at all. So and all these are about the parks, so that'll be great.
Sure.
Um, any park that you've been to, what is your favorite park?
Any park. Okay. Disneyland.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Go.
If I can travel through time, it's Epcot. But if I
Yeah.
can't, it's Disneyland.
Okay, going with
No,
the
I
original.
got to travel through and like through a time where it's actually open. So I don't know.
Yeah. So again, any of the parks you've been to, you have to pick one ride that you're going on. What's
Haunted
that
Mansion.
ride? Haunted Mansion.
Mhm.
Okay. And Magic Kingdom, Walt Disney World, or in Disneyland.
They're pretty close.
Yeah.
I'll give the edge to the Disney World version.
Okay.
I think they do have the superior mansion at this point.
One of the like the side notes on the Haunted Mansion that's so interesting to me is the idea that when they built it at Disneyland, the whole reason they had the stretching room
Mhm.
is to move people underground, where they didn't need that at Walt Disney World. They didn't need it in Walt Disney World at the Magic Kingdom. So, but they still needed the stretching room because it was so popular. So
Yeah.
that ceiling actually goes up when you're in Disneyland. You're actually going down on an elevator. I think it's just one of those neat kind of caveats or side notes.
And you know what it does at Tokyo?
What?
Both.
Oh, okay.
It goes down half a floor and
Yeah.
up the rest of the way. So
That's cool. That's really cool. I didn't know that. So anywhere you've been, favorite restaurant on any of
theme
the
park
properties?
restaurant.
Any Disney restaurant could be at a hotel, Disney Springs, Downtown Disney, anywhere.
That's a hard one. There was a long period when I was in grad school that I just did not eat at the parks. You know what? There's a really good little Japanese place that's completely out of the way in the park in the back of the Japan Pavilion, and I highly recommend it. So
Okay.
I'll throw that one out. I'm not sure it's my favorite, but it's the one I'm thinking of right now.
Okay. The thing that I do at the parks most of the time is I get close to eating my weight in treats. So, what is your preferred treat when you're in any of the parks?
Disney has underrated soft serve. Like whatever company
Mhm.
supplies their soft serve, it's really good.
Yeah.
So and the fact that my kids love it, like it's this fight free treat. So like yeah, I'll get that for the kids.
And then to wrap it up, favorite character.
Bread. Yeah.
What's that?
Or school bread. Or
Yeah.
school if you're in Epcot. So
Favorite character could be a parks character, could be from a movie. Favorite Disney character.
For a long time, my avatar was me with one of the Mary Poppins penguins,
Okay.
which I love that they have these walk around because they can just be, because they don't have this defined personality, it gives the walk around performers a lot of latitude. And so I think that's a ton of fun. And I'll also add to that, I love some of the things they're doing with the characters during quarantine where they can't get too close, where they're just having Winnie the Pooh like out with a butterfly net running around. I hope that they keep that sort of thing. I'm afraid it's just gonna go away with a budget cut. But to me, that like adds a breath of life to the parks that I'm sure will get cut immediately. So
well, and you do. It is like you're just observing you're not having to fast pass, and you're not standing in line
You're
to
not standing
meet
in
these
lines. You can
people.
hug Pooh. Like, I've never been a person who like really wanted to meet the characters, but
Yeah.
like watching them, observing them, imagining that they're in the same, inhabiting this world, is kind of magical.
Yeah, and I haven't been to the parks during all of this, but I have seen the videos of the cavalcades and people talking about the cavalcades and
Yeah.
saying, that's, hey, keep these around because
Yeah.
they're just fun.
Mhm.
They're there's no schedule. You don't, obviously there can't be a schedule because they don't want people gathering,
Yeah.
but it's just fun. And people I've even read people saying that it reminds them of how things used to be
Yeah.
before it got so large that it necessitated fast passes and lines and queues
Yeah.
and things like that. So thank you, Benjamin, so much for today. Thank you for coming back.
Oh, thank you.
When you do your next project or you're on your next few seasons, I'm sure there's going to be something that happens that we'll need to talk about again.
Definitely.
But could you tell the students and anyone listening how they can engage with you, the best way to reach you?
Certainly. On Twitter at Walt's Frozen Head, no O in Frozen. That's the easiest place to find me. And then subscribe to Prototype World of Tomorrow on your podcast, whatever of choice. If you're a person who listens on YouTube, it's Just a Head in a Jar is the channel name. And you can find us there and in any of those locations. So
And be sure to give a 5 chime review, right?
exactly.
That's another one
Exactly.
of that's another one of the fun things of the podcast is the the chimes as the phones and everything like that. So well, again, thank you very much for coming back and giving us kind of an update of what you're doing.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you.